backwards. That's all right. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Bill. It's good to be here. Nadja has the good fortune today of baptizing people in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, and that has nothing to do with we agnostics. I've asked my good friend Gigi to come in to assist on behalf of Nadja, and without any, what's the word you want to use? Automatically, she said yes. She was here before I was, believe it or not. So, Gigi, what happens is we read a paragraph, as you know, and we're going to comment on it. Now, we kind of take this meeting hostage until about 5 or 10 till the hour, and then they can stick around and do whatever they do. So it's a little like what we've done, but a little unlike. So you're up, page 53, starting at the paragraph, arrived at this point.
Okay, so good afternoon, good morning, afternoon, whatever it is for everybody. My name is Gigi. I'm an alcoholic, and it is my absolute pleasure to be here today with Bill, who I have immense respect for, and all of you who I have immense love for. So here I go. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us have already walked far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines and promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friends' hands stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us this far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason the last mile, and we didn't want to lose our support. So the first thing that's going to jump out at me here is reason being capitalized. And the reason for that, the reason for reason, is because that was our God. That was our higher power before we had this beautiful awakening. Right before this, the paragraph right before this, we got our first decision that we have to make. Our first decision doesn't really come in step 3. Our first decision comes right here in step 2. And if I can't accept this, I'm still basing my sobriety on fear and reason. But right now, I'm at the turning point, right? It tells us that and how it works. We stood at the turning point, right? This is the turning point. What am I going to do? I can't hide anymore. I hid. I hid from God for many, many years. I hid before AA, I hid in AA, and I hid after I joined AA. And it was only until I stopped hiding that I realized that God wasn't hiding from me. I was hiding from God, because the biggest promise comes at the end of this chapter. If I seek him, he will come to me. But what did I have to do first? And this is the turning point. I couldn't duck the issue, right? I did that. I ducked the issue. I pretended that God couldn't see me. I pretended that if God couldn't see how I was living my life, everything would be okay. I pretended that I was okay without God. And I leaned on reason. But what happens when I walk so far over that bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith? So reason isn't the desired faith. Reason is the bridge, right? And I'm going over that bridge towards, and I can see all the people that have done this program the way it's supposed to be done, the way it's outlined in the literature, that are using it, as you guys so say brilliantly in the name of this meeting, that are using it, right? This is life, okay? This is not a stop drinking program. This is life, right? This is a design for living. And I can see it, and people are reaching towards me, and they're trying to pull me in, and I won't go. Why won't I go? Fear. That's why I won't take that leap of faith. It's literally a leap of faith for that reason. Because when I leap, I can't look below me. And it's like almost like if anybody here has ever been zip lining, the freakiest thing for me when I zip lined was to step down into nothing. And that is how I describe what's being done in this paragraph right there. I have to step into nothing and go purely on faith. Like I said, the new land is capitalized also. I tend to look very closely at all the punctuation, all the emphases, and all of the capitals, because anytime I see a capital letter, I realize that's what we were using as our higher power. So now it's time to not use reason anymore, because I didn't want to lose my support, because well, it's fear, fear, fear. But I like to think, again, I like to think visually, and I like to think of fear as like I'm crossing the bridge and I'm holding on to this 100-year-old broken old person who's walking with a cane, and I'm leaning heavily. And that says a big R on the chest, right, for reason. And that's what I'm leaning heavily on. It's time for me to now lean heavily on something different than my own reason, because reason is nothing more than another word for self-reliance. Reliance, reason, both of them begin with an R. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to Bill.
Thank you so much, Gigi. For those who came with us today that weren't here last week, or people aren't following with the recordings on YouTube, she was started with the paragraph where it says arrived at this point. I think it's only fair to look at the short paragraph right before this to see what point we're arrived at. It's very important. And it says, when we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God is either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? I don't think there's any wrong choice, Gigi. If he's everything, I can't define him. And if he's nothing, I can't define that either. But let's move forward. And the magic of what you just said, the outlines and promise of the new land, it almost sounds like it's visionary, but I'm looking at it and believing it to be a mirage, because I'm so secure in the desert that I've been living for so long, that could this be real? Could I really step out like you're talking about? You know, one of those adages that I've heard is when you get to the end of all that there is that you can see, all the light that there is, and you have to step out into total darkness, you have to believe that one of two things is going to happen. Either you will step out onto solid ground, or God will teach you how to fly. See, here's the reality. I got to step from the known to the unknown. And the gift of alcoholism is I've got no other options. It doesn't look pleasant stepping out into the unknown, but if I stay here, the lions are coming and I know they're going to devour me. Abandon ourselves, it talks about, and how it works. I think about when you abandon a burning building. You don't stick around to find, you hope that someone catches you from below, but you don't want to take the risk of burning to death, so you've got to jump. When they say abandon ship, the ship's going down, I got to jump off and the sharks are looming. I don't know if that little raft is going to catch me, but I know for sure if I stay on the ship, I'm going down with the ship. Abandon's a very powerful word, and brought to the point of self-destruction through alcoholism and self-will. What a gift it is. It talks about alcohol becoming the great persuader. It finally crushed me to where, like we were talking about in this thing, a certain kind of faith. What does that mean? A certain kind of faith has brought me thus far. What kind of faith is it? It's not my kind of faith, but it's a certain kind of faith. The one that was placed in me from the beginning, knowing that at some point in my life I would need a certain kind of faith, not my own, of God. I looked up the word of. I'm on a little tangent. I'm going to give a talk one day for an hour on the word of, because what it means is a small particle of a whole. And all this time we talk about the conception of God, I think they're asking me my opinion about God. And what they're saying is the idea was his all along, not yours. What an amazing concept. And I can't see that when I'm relying on the God of reason, when I'm relying on my logic or my intellect, because none of it makes sense. In fact, I won't go to the airport because I believe man can't fly and I don't want to be proved wrong. I won't surrender to this power because I don't want to give up my prejudice. And the reality is, what this whole thing is designed to do is bring me to my own experience, my own conception, however limited it is, to say, guess what? I don't know. We threw up our hands and said, we don't know. That's enough. If I don't know, I got a shot. If I know for sure, I'm in trouble. Usually they don't let me share after every paragraph, Gigi. So I definitely, like you being here, I might have to replace Nadja.
Are we moving on? Okay. Alcoholic Gigi. That was natural, but let us think a little bit more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? For did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have the confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all along. So as Bill stated before, what is a certain kind of faith? I always tell my sponsees, watch the word certain. When you see the word certain in this book, it's a landmine, okay? They mean when you see the word certain, be very aware because that word is put in there for a very specific reason. And it's to make you question. And it's not a yes or no question. See, yes or no questions are very easy to answer. But it's these questions, the questions that we see with things like this, with the word certain in it, that are put there deliberately. Because the spirituality of this program is not in the answers to the questions, it's in the meditation on the answers to these questions. So, what is that certain kind of faith? Well, what kind of faith is it? Well, as quite often, I might get an answer if I read on. But it tells me, did we not believe in our own reasoning? See, when I first got here, people told me, let us love you till you can love yourself. And that never sat with me. And I realized why. Loving myself was not my problem. I loved myself too much. That was my problem. So I didn't need to be loved back to health. I needed to be shown the way back to health of body and mind. So what is my own reasoning? Again, these are glaring. My own reasoning is self-sufficiency. What do they tell me in the big book is going to block God sufficiency? Self-sufficiency. Anytime I see the word self, right? And again, it asks a paragraph of almost entirely of questions. But in the last sentence, bam, it's not a question mark anymore. Okay. Now it's saying, okay, we've given you all the questions. We're going to give you a hint at the answer, and then you have to find it, right? Having reached this crisis, will I admit and accept what they have to offer? Having reached the crisis, am I willing to take that certain kind of faith and apply it? See, that's the whole thing of it. I can have all the faith in the world, but I need to apply it. I have to have faith. And this is my faith. Did we not have a confidence in our ability to think? Well, of course I had confidence in my ability to think. I think that I'm not going to run out in front of a moving truck. Well, what is that? That's faith. That's faith in my reasoning. Objectly. I love that somebody put in the meaning of the word objectly. Cast down in spirit, spiritless. That's not a good thing, okay? If I know that objectly means spiritless, then I know that my faith to the God of the reason is without spirit. And if it is without spirit, it is the mind. Okay. Because see, when I first get this book, right, I see that this is not a self help book. Because if it was a self help book, it would be aimed at the mind. This book is aimed at the spirit. Okay. If I'm sitting here and I have a cup of coffee in front of me, and I pick up that cup of coffee and I drink it, right, with my hand, that is not my arm moving on its own. That's my mind telling my body to move. But what is guiding the mind, right? What is the big kahuna in charge of the mind? And that would be the spirit. The spirit, right? Mind trumps body, spirit trumps mind. So it's like a game, right? I want to get my spirit to the point where it will move my mind to do the right thing so that my hands and my feet can move to do the right thing. But if I'm still going on this God of reason, which is a God that I have created very carefully, step 3 tells me it's a God of my understanding, not a God of my imagination. Because a God of my imagination will let me do whatever I want. Okay. And it's not going to correct me in my behavior. So this is where I admit and I accept. This is just so powerful. And this was my chapter that I had trouble with. I had a lot of trouble with this chapter in the beginning because I didn't think of myself as agnostic. Ha. Thank you.
You can continue to read, Gigi. Sometimes I'll raise my hand or just cut in. You're not used to that, so I'm showing you respect for the first
No, I'm
20
not.
minutes.
Am I supposed to be sharing on every paragraph?
Um, yeah, but if there's something else where it alludes to something in the book, you can go to that. Nadja's real good at flip, and she's had us go through the book 6 times, and we're still on chapter 4. But if
Okay.
it lines up with something else, but real quick, as long as I'm in here, I mean, Kurt Z pointed this out without knowing it, without knowledge, without intent, without consent. Had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith. Isn't that amazing? Without knowing it, I ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous. I couldn't have spelled it or picked it out of a phone book. The first 2 letters in the dictionary, and I couldn't have found AA. Yet without knowing it, I have been brought here by a certain kind of faith. I think what they're telling us is this way that no one can define or comprehend, although a lot of people tried to. I listened to a great speaker yesterday. I listened to him 3 times. And he said, his sponsor says, I'm going to make the first 3 steps real simple. He said, if you don't realize that you will drink again, you will drink again. Step 1. If I don't get that I'm going to drink again, I'm going to drink again, powerless. He said, wow, sounds like we're screwed. He said, that's right. He said, it almost sounds like we need a miracle. He said, welcome to step 2. And he said, wow, that's amazing. He said, I want you to start praying. He said, I can't do that. I don't believe in God. He said, you don't have to believe in God. He said, you need to act like a person who professes a belief in God. And here's what he said that made so much sense. He said, the action is more important than the belief. Because as soon as I develop a belief, it starts to separate me from those who believe otherwise. Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't ask you to believe much other than coming to terms with the hopelessness. Do you believe that your life, the way you're living it, is going nowhere? I believe. Welcome to step 3. Make a decision to quit running your life because you're not doing a good job. And then we're going to go through the layers of self, which is what this chapter is about. Me and Donnie read these pages last night for an hour and tore them apart. Isn't it amazing? It tells us where he is, chapter 4, how to find him, chapter 5 and 6, and what to do when we do find him, chapter 7. This thing's amazing. I don't have to identify them. I don't have to give them a name. And if what someone tried to do when they defined that power to get me to believe what I could not believe, I don't even have to accept that. I just need to participate with the faith that I've been brought to without knowing it. That's amazing. If I could realize that the creator of all this had everything mapped out for me, including a reset button, knowing how obstinate I would be standing in the face of grace and never once changing the course of that sway. Like someone put on Facebook, I'm not much of a social media guy, says, I've given God 1,000 reasons not to love me, and not one of them has changed his mind. Boy, if I only knew how much he loved me, I'd want to jump up on his lap and see what he had in store for me. But sometimes I like the pretty girls more than God. That's my fault, not his. Thanks. Go ahead, Gigi.
Hi. Okay. Thanks so much, Bill. Alcoholic Gigi. We found too that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentimental things, money, and ourselves, and then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with reason, pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were these not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship in one form or another. We had been living by faith and little else. So again, a lot of questions here. First starts out with a statement with that exclamation point at the end. And then it's going to ask me, right? Worship. When we hear the word worshiping things, I think sometimes, depending on certain religions that we were, raised in, right? We get this image of people like building like these temples and these gods and worshiping and everything, and we think, oh my goodness, I would never do that. There's only one God. But then we realize that when we worship things, it doesn't only mean that we're constructing golden idols and worshiping those things. This is really what worshiping other things is about. And this is what I love. I absolutely love this paragraph because this is where we weave our primary purpose, which is tradition 5, and what directly supports it, which is tradition 6. And here we see the outline of that in here, even though the traditions were years and years and years away from being written at this point. But what does it tell us in tradition 6? It tells us that we should never let money, property, and prestige interfere with our primary purpose. And isn't it telling us that right here in the big book? Money, property, and prestige should never interfere with our primary purpose. Money, property, prestige, people, sentimental things, money, and ourselves. And then because we have a better motive, we think it's okay. Because then we look at the sunset, the sea, the flower, and go, oh God, somebody created all of this. But it's not my motives that I need to look at. I was once told by someone, again, people that I tremendously respect and know far more than I do in this program, that when I asked him specifically about a motive, and I said to him, am I playing God here? And he said, do not look at your motives. Look at whether or not it violates the spiritual principles that you have come to know and love in this program. And it did not. He said, does stopping abuse of an elder, does that align with your spiritual principles? If it does, you are not playing God. And with that, I was able to move forward and help this person. And it talks about, again, all of these questions. And again, these questions are not yes or no answers. There are questions to seriously think about, meditate on, put into where is God in my program? We have learned about agnosticism. We have learned that when the material shows up, the spiritual goes right out the window. Will I continue to excel based on the mistakes that I have made? Or will I learn and move forward? Will I embrace mistakes and make more mistakes? Continue to make the same mistakes? Or will I look forward? And it's talking now about what did these loves, these worships, what did they do for us? Little or nothing. They didn't have anything to do with reason. So now it's taking my God, right, that I've had, that I thought I had, which is the God of reason, and telling me that if I have a capacity to love, if I have a capacity to work this out in my own head, what does that have to do with reason? Absolutely nothing. And then it tells me the tissue of which my lives were constructed. Try constructing anything out of tissue and see what happens. So, and now it's telling me that it's impossible to say that I don't have faith, that I don't have love. I've been living by faith all along. I must accept the human condition, and the human condition is that I am limited and I am not in control. And only whoever was the creator of time and space can live outside of it. And I am not the creator of time and space, and I can't live outside of it. So, what is it telling me? It's telling me that if I accept that there is something more powerful, greater than myself, I am now plugging in. I've had that. I'm now plugging into the source of power. See, the way I describe it is I've got this phone here in front of me, right? That's what I'm coming to all of you on. And when I have this phone in front of me, this phone, okay, I can do anything with it. I can watch Netflix, I can play games, I can go on Zoom, I can check the weather in Zimbabwe, I can look up people that I can try to find people that are still on, I can do anything with this phone, right? But I have to plug it in to a source of power, okay? And if I have the source of power, which is the electrical socket on the wall, and I have the phone, but I don't have the cord, I can take this phone and use it as a giant paperweight because it's not plugged into the source of power. That is what the steps, that is what the work, that is what all of these things are designed to do, designed for living again. I am now plugged into the source. I can use this book as a GPS to plug me into the source of power. And that is what I'm doing right here. That's all I got. Bill, do you have anything? Okay. I feel like a meeting hog here. Okay, so imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. I love that dash, that continuation of thought. We could not prove life in the sense you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Yet there it was. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling onto a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seemed more intelligent than that. At least so the chemist said. And if it's okay, I'm just going to read this next little short one because I think they go together. Hence, we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanate from our best minds. What about the people who proved that man could never fly? So here it is now. At the bottom of the page that we started out with, we were talked about the very first paragraph that we read tonight, to this afternoon. we were confronted with our God, which was the God of reason. And now, one page, a few paragraphs later, that illusion. See, right? We have a life of illusion and delusion. I can't tell the truth from the false. I don't even know that my body can't process alcohol, that my mind can't process reality, and that my spirit can't process powerlessness until I come in here. I don't even know that. Okay. I think I'm in complete control. And I think the way I'm living life is good. It's the rest of you people. It's the people that are paying their bills on time. It's the people that are seeing where religious people are right. It's those people that are seeing all of that stuff. Okay? It's the people that are living their life according to spiritual principles. They're the crazy ones as far as I'm concerned. I I know what life is all about. And then in this paragraph right here, it sums up what we've had in the last 3 paragraphs on this page and the page before it. And it tells me that reason doesn't work. Reason is a fallacy. It doesn't work. So what is it going to tell me? It's going to tell me if my life lived on pure reason, it's not life. I don't know what it is. It's existence, maybe, but it's not life. Because without faith, without love, there's pure reason. And with pure reason, fear is very prominent. So I believe in life. I can't prove it, but I believe in it. I believe that we're alive. I don't believe this whole thing is, a dream state that I'm living in. I don't think I'm living in the middle of the Truman Show, okay, where I don't know what's real and what's not, okay? But here I am. And could I say that the entire creation of this world, that everything that we see, everything that we experience, is absolutely nothing? And the whole thing, the worst part of the whole thing is that our destiny, right? Now, when else do we see the word destiny? The road of happy destiny. Am I to believe that I'm traveling this road with all of you, with other people in life, that I'm doing my best to do what I can to live by spiritual principles, and that it all means nothing? I'm sorry, but I can't believe that. Maybe it would work for other people, but it doesn't work for me. I believe that there is a reason that we are doing all this. I pull a Dr. Bob, right? I say that I'm never going to darken the doors of a church again. And last Sunday I was visiting my child, my daughter in Connecticut, and she's the church boss. Everybody get up, get dressed. We're going to 8:30 mass. So all the readings and all the biblical readings that they pick to read, what is it? Faith without works is dead, from the book of James. And she looks over at me because she knows, I've been sober. She throughout most of her formidable years. I got sober when she was 13. She's 24. And she looks over at me and goes, "Ha, still gonna tell me you weren't meant to be here today?" And then the priest ends his sermon with the serenity prayer. I was afraid to look at her at that point. Um, and here's the thing, right? Am I to believe that all of these things, am I to believe that the way all the stars fell together to create this program, that in 1909 at Clark University, uh, William James and Carl Jung bump into each other? Carl Jung, who's from Zurich, and William James, born and raised in the United States, and they walk into each other and they have this whole conversation about different ways that men find God. And then 20 years later, Roland Hazard comes to Carl Jung. Am I to believe that this all happened for no reason? Well, it's going to tell me even pure electrons are smarter than that, right? And at least so the chemist said. At one time, chemists were Bill's higher power. Okay. Not anymore, obviously. But they tell us reason isn't everything. God is dependable. God is dependable. And it emanates from our best minds, right? Whatever it is I'm worshiping, I'm turning my consciousness towards that. So if I'm worshiping people, things, money, sentimental things, reason, I am turning my consciousness towards that. Okay. In step 3, it's going to ask me to turn my consciousness towards God, my lives, my past, my present, my future. If I do that, if I turn my consciousness towards God, what am I turning away from? That's what I have to ask myself. Thank you.
Gigi, that was a lot there. In the stead of Naji, I'll say turn to your books, page 13, second last paragraph from the bottom in Bill's story. What Gigi was just talking about. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. Because it tells us here, that second paragraph she read, hence we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable. How about the people who insisted man could never fly? So Bill discovered that things that seemed commonsensical may not be, that he was to test this new consciousness with this God consciousness, that when in doubt, he was to sit quietly and ask for direction, which is where it all comes from. But I had a brilliant thought and it escaped me. But all the thoughts I have are brilliant, so I'm sure it will come back. It was just, oh, but you were talking about William James, Carl Jung, and of course, Rob, for those who can't see this on the audio, he posted a picture of a bunch of obviously notable people. Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, William James. They were all brought together in a picture. And I was thinking about it when it talks about have we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the moon, the love that we have. How many of us come in here and worship this book? How many of us worship the founders? We worship the steps. We worship the menu rather than the power. We do the very things we claim that we have no faith in right here in this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. And behind it all, when we look at the traditions, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all of this. How often does God remain anonymous? And when we gloat and take the credit for his good blessings and fortune, he never once withdraws them. He sits back. That's a gentleman. I'm going to let you take the credit for only what he could do. And yet he doesn't once balk or take it away or say, hey, you guys, imagine you taking the credit for something good I did, Rob, we'd have a big problem. I'd have to post it on every WhatsApp platform and say, Rob's mistaken and here's the proof. But he lays back and he lets us enjoy his glory because of our humanness. Capacity, that's a powerful word. The amount of room that there is to contain. How could we say we had no capacity for faith when we had been living by nothing but faith all along, unknowing? And you said one more thing, but I gave you two great thoughts there. I'll let you digest those. You know, sometimes you got to plant them in the ground and let them mature. But we're going to get into something real powerful here. I could hardly wait for this page.
Okay. Alcoholic Gigi. Yet we have been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible and we only smiled. We have seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Wow. That paragraph contains, in my opinion, one of the greatest promises of this book. That's why I get frustrated when we talk about certain promises as if they're their only promises. This book is full of promises and predictions as well. The predictions aren't quite as nice as the promises. And I like to think of them as, you know, in A Christmas Carol, you know, and sometimes those predictions can be real dark, right? They can have that, the guy cloaked, you know, what we will do if. I think that'd be like a really fun thing to do one day in a big book study, right? Look at every sentence in this book that has if. There's always 400, there are over 400 of them in the book, and look at exactly what those ifs mean, right? Because sometimes they can be real threatening. And they should be, with us. But this is another kind of flight, right? People proved that we can't fly, right? Professor Langley's plane went down in the Potomac. Those silly Wright brothers, they really think they're going to fly. And now look at us, right? Could we have ever thought someday that we could leave the country and affiliate with people all over the world from a seat in our desk chair in Alcoholics Anonymous? Have we ever thought that a woman in South Carolina could have 12 or 13 sponsees, only one of which is local? Could we even have thought that these things would happen? Could we imagine that we could have gone to conferences in China, in Poland, all over the world? We could not have thought those things either, right? So look at this, right? Spiritual liberation. What spiritual liberation? Well, look at the 10th step promises, and you will see, as a matter of fact, why not? Let's go to those 10th step promises. And we have ceased fighting anyone or everything, including alcohol. That sounds like spiritual liberation to me. Sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. We will react sanely and normally, and will happen automatically. Wow. We are not fighting it, neither are we afraid. God's will for me is to be happy, joyous, and free. And that only way I know to do that is through my actions. I cease fighting when I return to sanity. I am no longer relying on the steps. Sanity returns with the end of step 9. I automatically do these things and I don't give it a second thought. That's spiritual liberation. I always heard, one of the things that always stuck with me in Alcoholics Anonymous, not from the book, okay? And I always say, oh, if it's not from the book, oh, but there are things, and it says I get tired of listening to myself sometimes, but there are things that stuck with me. And one of them was when somebody said, what other people think of you is none of your business. And for me, that's spiritual liberation, right? Because as long as I'm doing the right thing, as long as I'm living my life by spiritual principles, and I know that God loves me, does it really make a difference if my neighbor doesn't like me because I might not want to indulge in their gossip, right? And what makes these things possible? Like Bill pointed out, not the steps, not the traditions, not the big book, not meetings. God made these things possible. And we, recovered people, only smiled. Why? Because we have had this experience. We have spiritual release, but still something's drawing us right back in and saying, no, it's got to be something else. It's got to be something else. Maybe you got a new job. Maybe your kids started talking to you again. Maybe this. It can't be just because you have become God reliant. There's still something. There's still that hand that wants to reach out and pull us back. And that's the illness. And so in order to maintain my spiritual condition, like it tells me again in step 10, I have to be relentless in this spiritual liberation. What could be better than that? Thank you.
Fortunately or unfortunately, we only cover so much in this period. The 2 pages prior to this, 2.5 pages on 52, it says, but in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation. There's that word again, of our thinking. What liberates my thinking? They're referring to man could never fly, and all of a sudden, my thinking has changed because I see people flying, right? I don't go back now every year and they tell me Santa Claus isn't real. For those of you who still believe he is, I get that. I'm not trying to change your mind, but you didn't have to tell me that anymore. My mom's signature was on the card when I was 17, and she finally said, I hate to break this to you, but there is no Santa Claus. And then here it says, but we have been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation. And Kurt talks about this. This is a powerful, I don't know what this means yet, but I will because I'm going to seek. We had seen spiritual release. That means something of spirit got a hold of something of flesh that was in bondage and set it free. So, where do we see that? Well, we see it through each other in Alcoholics Anonymous. We see it here. We hear the stories. We watch some people come after us. We trust the people that have gone before us, that when they tell us this happened, like it says, we only smiled and told ourselves it wasn't true, it wasn't so. Spiritual release. Someone who was bound to something, an obsession of the mind that compelled them to always take the first drink against their will. And then, as Gigi so eloquently pointed out, a body that cannot be satisfied with the first drink and has to have more with each and every drink. And all of a sudden, one day, something happens and I'm set free from that. And then I'm going to sit back and say that isn't so. We have been seeing spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves, why is it not so? Because I can't believe it for me, Gigi. I can't believe it for me. And we go to the third pertinent idea at the end of how it works that we read at every meeting. And the very next line in the book says, being convinced. A sponsor would always take me to those three pertinent ideas, which are the first two steps plus, and say, are you convinced of A? Absolutely. I'm alcoholic, life unbearable. Got it. Check. You got me there. No human power, not any ones that I've tried, and I've tried quite a few. Check. That God could and would if he were sought. I don't know if I'm convinced yet, but I changed that to say I'm willing to be convinced that God could and would if he were sought. All I need is a willingness to be convinced, because if I have to wait to be convinced, I may have to have the experience myself. I might be so obstinate I can't rely on your spiritual release. But if I'm willing, I can move forward. And then it essentially describes for me in the next 3 pages nothing about God or what I have to believe. It shows me what my life lived by me looks like. And we go back to what are they really alluding to here in this paragraph you just read? Are they not talking about spiritual liberation from the bedevilments that they spoke about on page 52? We were having trouble with personal relationships, a prey to misery and depression. We can't control our emotional nature. We can't make a living. We can't be useful or helpful. We're full of fear. Was not a solution of these bedevilments whether or not I believe that man went to the moon? Of course it was. But we were still telling ourselves it's impossible for it to happen to me. And ironically, here was my other brilliant thought. I told you it would come back to me. They usually do. In the spiritual appendix, which it asks us a couple of times, maybe 3 in this particular chapter, and they're nice about it. You please read, you must read, you'll want to read the spiritual appendix, and then they apologetically tell us if we who were facing the near of despair and death, looking into the abyss, if we gave you the impression that you had to be filled with the Holy Ghost immediately, we apologize. Because a lot of us sensed that we had some of these symptoms. And before we got to the edge of the cliff, we were able to say, you know what? I have what you have. I might not have gone to the length you did, so God may not have to show up as extravagantly as he did for you. But when there's nothing left, right? When you're in total darkness and someone lights a candle, boy, it seems like the sun's shining. It's just barely a candle. Not everyone went into total darkness. So what they say is, guess what? Educationally, you can come to believe. Take the steps, be of service, stick around here a while and watch the miracles unfold before your very eyes. And you will come to believe as vehemently as those of us who had that experience of spirit that Bill talks about. Not everyone has to have that, but guess what? Some people come in and they're still able to raise their kids. They haven't been estranged for decades. Some of them are able to still have a car so they can pick up the homeless drunks and take them to meetings. God has a plan for all this. But our job is not to beat you up with our treacherous past because you didn't go that far and make you feel any less worthy of the gift or the grace of God. And occasionally, myself included, am guilty of it. We do that here. And ironically, the people who didn't go that far seem to celebrate. The sicker we are, the more they like us here at AA. I'm tired of being the sickest guy in the room. I don't have no more to pay. I surrender. I give up. I'm joining the winning team. Gigi, you know what? Unfortunately, and because there's 8 or 10 times that they're going to talk about exactly where God may be found, for right now, I think we should reserve the next paragraph for Nadia for next week. And what we'll do now is open it up for questions, comments, and judgments. But Rob, take off the recording before they judge me. We're